Welcome to NewsNation's Backscroll, where we look back at our major news coverage on the most important topics and personalities of our time.
High-stakes summit tomorrow will be the first in-person meeting between Trump and Putin since 2019. President Trump today described posturing with his Russian counterpart as a game of chess, albeit very high-stakes chess. The two will meet with translators tomorrow afternoon starting at 3:30 Eastern. A luncheon with larger delegations is planned afterwards, and then there is a joint press conference. It's supposed to start around 7:30 p.m. Eastern, so just about the time we come on the air. Again, emphasis on the word planned. Trump has said multiple times that he may just blow it up and walk away. In simple terms, tomorrow's meeting is a showdown between two of the most powerful men on the planet, and that has been true for the past 80 years when the President of the United States and the leader of Russia, the Soviet Union, whatever you want to call it, sit down. But this is different because Trump and Putin are not typical leaders of either of those two countries. Trump and Putin both view themselves as the ultimate negotiator and manipulator. Tomorrow, we're going to find out who is playing who. That's our Why It Matters segment tonight. Trump wrote The Art of the Deal, where he explained how he gets people to do what he wants in the business world. Whatever it takes. Sometimes it's charm, sometimes it's threatening, sometimes it's cajoling. He is the quintessential New York real estate man. He tells you all the time, I do deals. Putin, on the other hand, is a former KGB agent, the spy master, trained by the very best in the world to manipulate, blackmail, persuade, and bribe people to betray their country. That's how Putin was trained. He's a sociopath. Entering the summit, it's important to point out what both sides want. Trump has shifted his tone towards Putin significantly since he first took office. In February, you might remember he blamed Ukraine for starting the war. Today, he said he won't let Putin bully him. Trump knows that he might have to walk away from the summit without a peace deal in order to get what he wants and be the one in control. Putin has said he might leave. The president also knows what Putin's endgame is.
It's a war that should have never happened. If I weren't president, in my opinion, he would much rather take over all of Ukraine. But I am president, and he's not going to mess around with me.
That's laying down a red line that Putin does not want to hear. Putin wants all of Ukraine, and then to bring back the glory of the Soviet Union, if you can call it that. At the bare minimum, Putin must justify this war to his people. To do that, he's got to keep as much of the land that he has already seized. And Putin knows that his country faces terrible economic ruin if Trump moves forward with the sanctions. The Russian economy will collapse. Trump knows that, too. That's huge. That's leverage for Trump. If Trump gets a ceasefire, that's a big win. If Putin avoids sanctions, that's a big win. Both men could use a win coming out of tomorrow.
President Trump's summit with Vladimir Putin tomorrow will be Putin's first meeting with an American president since his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. He met with President Biden back in 2021. Putin said they spoke the same language. Two leaders, though, held separate press conferences after their meeting. It was a huge summit, big delegations on both sides, a lot of international press, as you would expect. I was there covering it. It was in Geneva. Biden didn't call on me for a question, though, when he held that solo news conference. President Trump sat down with Putin in 2018, his first term, meeting alone with their translators behind closed doors. And then Trump and Putin held a joint press conference. Chief Washington correspondent Blake Berman was at that one, Helsinki, Finland. He joins us now ahead of the Hill at the top of the hour. That was a humdinger, as the president himself might say, the Helsinki meeting, for a number of different reasons. I would say this. I remember about Geneva, and again, it was Biden, very, very scripted, right? Yeah. They had the press from, we were the U.S. press in one side, Russian press and on the other side, separate news conferences afterwards. Really, really staged and scripted. What do you remember most about Helsinki being there?
That it was very hot and there wasn't air conditioning. And beyond that, being in the same room, seriously, it was like a heat wave there in Finland. But beyond that, being in the same room with Vladimir Putin, Connell, was something that I will never forget, ever. It was pretty wild to be there. This was in the actual presidential palace there, which sounds grand, and it is, but it was actually it's a very small facility. And we were all there, the U.S. media and the U.S. side on one side. And I don't remember how much Russian presence there was there, to be honest. But I do remember seeing Putin and Trump there. And it was just a wild experience being in the same room with Vladimir Putin. I had been, luckily, Connell, in the same room with President Trump and world leaders multiple times around the world, in the White House, Oval Office, throughout the White House, etc. It was just different with Putin. You get a much different feeling, and I will tell you, as a reporter, being there in that setting, and keep in mind this is Donald Trump, so really anything goes when it comes to the press and press conferences, wondering, what if I get called on?
Right.
What do I ask Vladimir Putin with the whole world watching?
Are they calling you?
And I didn't get called on.
Oh, okay. Got to be ready.
But yeah, you got to be ready. And I can guarantee you, there's a lot of folks running that scenario through their mind right now.
Well, including Trump, right? In some ways, I feel like that's one of the interesting things going into this, because as you say, you were in the room, but so was Trump, as president, at least for the first time, right? And now, what does everybody remember from that? Clips like this, but talking about the intelligence community, have been replayed a number of times. This is a short one, and then you think about, what has he changed going into Alaska? This is 2018, Trump.
To me, Dan Coates came to me and some others. They said they think it's Russia. I have President Putin. He just said it's not Russia. I will say this. I don't see any reason why it would be.
So headline after, as you know, Blake, became, here's the President of the United States on foreign soil throwing his own intelligence community essentially under the bus. That's what everybody was talking about after that. Lessons learned going into tomorrow.
He got hammered. After that, hammered. You remember, Connell, you were on air. I was in Finland. He got hammered for it. And as he was flying back on Air Force One, the coverage was not kind, from sort of very friendly media to not friendly media, and folks in between. And I don't think it's coincidental, Connell, that today we heard from both Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin trying to set the stage sort of with their own script or their own how they want this to be viewed going into it, at least.
Yeah, you set the expectations, set the bar, try to, jump over it, but maybe avoid things like that.
President Trump is ramping up the pressure on Russian President Vladimir Putin a day before he leaves for their high-stakes summit in Alaska. The president now promising severe consequences if the two can't reach a ceasefire deal. Those comments coming after a phone call with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and other European leaders as well. NewsNation's Robert Sherman is live for us once again in Kyiv. Robert, what's the feeling on the ground about some sort of deal coming out of this meeting?
Well, it's really tense, Marky, especially when you take into account for a lot of people here, they believe that it's a very realistic possibility that what happens in Ukraine will be decided thousands of miles away. We even saw the level of that tenseness up close when we were with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy the other day. There is this reality here is that as Russia and the U.S. prepare to sit down, Ukraine is going to be on the outside looking in. Who else will be on the outside looking in? The Europeans. And this is what we've seen over recent days here. President Zelenskyy was in Germany yesterday. Today, he's in the United Kingdom meeting with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer as everyone tries to get their objectives aligned ahead of that Friday summit in Alaska. President Zelenskyy emphasizing, however, he is still not confident Russian President Vladimir Putin is serious about peace. Take a listen.
I told my colleagues, the U.S. president and our European friends, that Putin definitely does not want peace. He wants the occupation of our country, and we all really understand that. Putin will not be able to deceive anyone. We need further pressure for peace. not only American, but also European sanctions.
That's why President Trump said that he wanted to have this summit to look Russian President Vladimir Putin in the eye to determine if he is serious or not. And if all goes well on Friday, the president says there's going to be another meeting in the trilateral format with all of these heads of state.
And we'll have a quick second meeting between President Putin and President Zelenskyy and myself if they'd like to have me there. Certain great things can be gained in the first. It's going to be a very important meeting, but it's setting the table for the second meeting.
Meanwhile, as there's all this talk of diplomacy in Alaska, we are seeing Russian forces advancing through the Donbass region in Donetsk Oblast as an example here. What the Ukrainians say that they believe is coming after this Friday summit is a large-scale Russian offensive in the coming days here through Donetsk Oblast. The thinking is from the Ukrainian side is that Russia will want to pick up as much land as possible to bolster their negotiating position ahead of these talks.
We are now 48 hours ahead of that high-stakes summit with Vladimir Putin. And at that time, now as we are in these critical hours, Vladimir Putin is significantly ramping up his military attacks on Ukraine, and President Trump, all part of the strategic jockeying, is ramping up his tough talk.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
The president has a number of tools at his disposal, including secondary sanctions and tariffs on countries that buy Russian oil and gas. Those are something that Joe Biden could have done but never did. President Putin must believe that the tough talk is going to turn into tough actions. It is the only language that Vladimir Putin understands. That's our Why It Matters segment tonight. President Trump wants the killing to stop. That is a noble goal. Endless war is not an option. And there's real risks if the war in Ukraine rolls on. Every day is a risk of escalation and miscalculation, especially when one of the people involved in that war controls the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. And therefore, Vladimir Putin has a real say, obviously, in how this war ends, if it ends. And the only chance for the killing to stop is if Putin believes he will have to pay an unbearable price for continuing his assaults on Ukraine. That's the only chance. So the stakes couldn't be higher. The meeting's going to happen Friday in Alaska at a military installation about 4,000 miles from Moscow, about the same distance from Washington, D.C. What no one is talking about right now is that you don't hear that the Ukrainians say the Russians appear open to a deal, open to a ceasefire. There's a reason for that. That reason is how President Trump has played this. The war is now in its 1,266th day. It is the definition of a stalemate. A meat grinder is what the military folks say. And the drone and airstrikes are covered heavily. We hear about it. But the fighting along the front lines is akin to World War I. It is hell. This is new video showing Ukrainian troops in close combat. This is what Ukrainians are going through every day. You see a unit storm a bombed-out building to rescue a wounded soldier before exiting back to their truck. This bloody fighting is going on day after day after day. Ahead of the summit, the president is, well, offering, you could say, measured expectations about reaching some kind of full deal on Friday, something the White House, in terms of expectations, has been consistent on all week long.
There's a very good chance that we're going to have a second meeting, which will be more productive than the first.
This is a listening exercise for the president. Look, only one party that's involved in this war is going to be present.
This is really a feel-out meeting, a little bit. And probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made. Now, I may leave and say, good luck, and that'll be the end. I may say this is not going to be settled.
Dean is live on the North Lawn at the White House for us today. All right, Libby, what's the latest from there?
Hey, Connell, President Trump actually rated this morning's emergency summit that took place. He rated it a 10, and two sources also tell me that both the vice president and Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, of course, they were on that call this morning that the president says went well. Let's take a listen to him.
Very good call. He was on the call. President Zelenskyy was on the call. I would rate it a 10, very, very friendly. It's going to be a very important meeting, but it's setting the table for the second meeting. I think the second meeting, if the second meeting takes place, now there may be no second meeting, because if I feel that it's not appropriate to have it because I didn't get the answers that we have to have, then we're not going to have a second meeting.
The president casting some doubt there on a potential second meeting, but the German chancellor who called for this morning's meeting, that virtual summit, saying that during that meeting, summit leaders actually urged President Trump to make his message to Moscow clear, that they won't tolerate the invasion of Ukraine, and ultimately they want Trump in this meeting with Putin to push him towards a ceasefire. That is, of course, what the Europeans and Zelenskyy are wanting. Zelenskyy also had this strong message for Trump ahead of this meeting, claiming that Putin is bluffing on wanting peace at all. Let's listen to Zelenskyy.
There must be a ceasefire. Number one, there must be really reliable security guarantees. Today, by the way, President Trump spoke about supporting this and about America's readiness to participate. Sanctions must be in place, and they must be strengthened if Russia does not agree to a ceasefire in Alaska.
So President Trump and his administration here keeping expectations relatively low heading into Friday. The president did say that he wants to hear what Putin has to say. He wants to do that face-to-face. That's what is going to happen in Alaska. But the president also warning there will be very severe consequences for Russia if they won't move towards ending the war during this meeting that's going to happen on Friday. But the next thing to watch for here is this potential trilateral that you just heard President Trump mention there. That would, of course, be between Zelenskyy, Trump, and Putin. And Trump saying that meeting now all depends on how things go with Putin on Friday in Alaska. Connell?
You know, it's interesting. Because President Trump's kind of a different type of president, just the way he approaches things. I'm always interested in this. Ahead of a big, meeting like this, or a debate, or whatever it may be, do we know how the president is prepping for Friday?
Connell, we're actually learning some key details on how he's prepping. A senior White House official that I just spoke with said that the president, he's feeling optimistic. That is how he described when I said, can you describe how the president is feeling in one word? That is what they told me. But he's also, this prep that he's doing behind closed doors. You mentioned, of course, he talked with world leaders today. We saw that happen during this morning's emergency summit that took place. But these key details that we're learning is the president is meeting with key advisors, 3 key advisors. It's his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, and, of course, his right-hand woman, Susie Wiles, his chief of staff. Now, the White House says that this Alaska meeting, though, you'll remember it came about because Putin actually requested it during his closed-door meeting with Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff, a couple of weeks ago. So it makes sense that Witkoff is the one who's meeting with President Trump behind closed doors. And the White House official also telling me that Witkoff is the one who's laying out the facts for the president as he just had this face-to-face meeting with Putin himself in Russia. So one thing we're going to be tracking is the potential of this trilateral. But interesting enough, Connell, we were reporting over the weekend that President Trump was considering inviting Zelenskyy. Of course, that's not going to happen now. But a separate White House official telling me that was never the case. He wasn't ever considering inviting Zelenskyy. This was always a bilateral, not a trilateral. And that's kind of something we heard the president lay out during his remarks today at the Kennedy Center as well, Connell.
All right, Libby Dean's live at the White House.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.